The last thing you want is for something to go wrong with your plumbing, but it happens a lot. And the last thing you want when there's water spraying all over your kitchen or your toilet is overflowing is looking up reviews on which plumber you should call. So let me save you some time. Call the Art of Plumbing. They're always on time. They can locate the problem and fix it right away. They even help with solutions to stop any future problems. Save time. Call the Art of Plumbing today. 541-951-9405.
Perspectives change with broken strings and worn out souls. Years ago and some with wings. Some are old, some undersold. To grow we need to rely on and try on some other people's shoes. Some other people's shoes.
Thank you so much for joining us on Other People's Shoes, of course. I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. All the way from Missouri, my next guest joins us from there. He is a father. He's a husband. He's a podcaster. He actually hosts a show, which I'm really excited about because it's a fascinating show. Great guests. Always has good content. Halfway there, he's a man that likes to start the conversation and maybe some controversy. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Help me welcome in my guest, Eric. Eric, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's great to hear from you and good to talk to you.
Well, first off, we've never talked before. We've probably traded countless Facebook messages and, back and forth comments and stuff like that. So it's great to finally have, in my mind, kind of the Godfather in my mind of podcasting. Is that putting you too elevated, perhaps?
No, well, I'm not. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's, first of all, very kind. I would consider myself, sort of like the most I'll take is a consigliere of podcasting, maybe. But I've had the privilege of having. I would say the same thing about Cliff Ravenscraft. You know Cliff Ravenscraft?
I don't know him. No.
He's one of the guys. When I started podcasting, all roads led to Cliff, and so I actually call him the Godfather of podcasting. But I love that. I appreciate it. Thanks for the love. I appreciate it.
In my mind, you and Dave Jackson, right? You know Dave Jackson. He
Yeah.
does the School of Podcasting. So what's funny is I got an email from him randomly. So Dave, if you ever hear this, thank you for the random email back to us. I was talking about the Rodecaster Pro, which so many podcasters, it seems like, are going to that. We use it. Maybe others are using it as well. Great tool. Great, obviously, so much awesome stuff to it. But we've been having a challenge of doing remote stuff. And so somehow Dave reached out to me and was like, hey, here's a great resource to solve that solution for remote stuff. So that was cool of him to do that. And so we're trying to connect, see if we can get the great Dave Jackson in his shoes. So so stay tuned for that, maybe.
The Podcasting Hall of Fame, I believe. So
is he really? There's a Hall of Fame? You're messing with me. Are you messing with me right now?
There's a Podcasting Hall of Fame. I'm not in it yet, but
I'll nominate you. What does it take to get you a bus?
I don't even know. But he is, and he's actually going to be at the Spark Christian Podcasters Conference.
I don't want to talk about that. Can we not talk about that?
Yeah, you don't.
I don't want to talk about that.
We don't have to go there.
It's like $1,800 for us to go.
I'm so sorry.
I know. All right, let's get back on topic. So, hey, Eric, you're awesome. I love it. Hey, Eric, what size shoes are we in today for you?
We're 10.5.
We wear the same size. That's awesome. What brand are we rocking?
Oh, I think Clark.
Are you really wearing Clarks?
Yeah.
Okay, no judgment.
Is that bad?
No, it's fine. No, like most people are like, oh yeah, I love Adidas. Oh, I'm wearing Clarks.
Well, they're just sort of run-of-the-mill dress shoes, black dress shoes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wearing my Jordan 11s because I put them on today just for you because I'm like, if I'm going to sit with greatness, I got to have greatness on my feet.
Nice.
So I'm rocking my Air Jordan 11s, white with the Carolina stripe, of course, because it's all about Carolina blue. So
yeah, boy. In retrospect, I should have gone with something a little bit cooler.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had Meg on, which I know you've had her on as well, and she broke down her shoes quite extensively. Probably the best shoe breakdown we've had so far. So she wins the prize so far if there was one to give away. She's a
Nice.
neat lady and
You,
great having her. So,
I'm
but
not really much of a shoe guy, to be honest. Like I want to have nice shoes, right? But or at least decent, reasonable shoes. But here's the thing: I have like one pair of shoes that are like really good. They're like an $80 Italian leather kind of thing, and that my cousin gave me when I was in his wedding. And that's pretty much it. That's like, so if I have to dress up, I'll wear those. But otherwise, I'm wearing these slip-ons. They work better.
that's okay. Like I don't sit in shoe judgment over people.
Okay.
It's my obsession. So
I'm all insecure about my shoes.
yeah, I was like,
All right,
wow,
great. Well,
my,
I can't
I'm
wait. Here we
sitting
go.
with a greatness and I'm making him feel like a schlub or something. I don't know. Hopefully not, but all right. So so let's dive into this. Greatest challenge facing podcasters today, in your opinion?
Oh man. Well, okay. So I think podcasters ask basically 3 questions. It depends. So it all depends on where you are in your podcasting journey. The first question podcasters ask is like, what should I podcast about, right? So this is all about message and voice. So that's one challenge. Okay, I hope it's okay. I'm going to give you 3 challenges. So the second one is like,
Yeah,
what's
I
the
like
technology?
it. 3 challenges are great.
Good. You talked about the Rodecaster Pro. So the technology actually is getting easier. It's never been easier and cheaper to record your voice and put out a podcast. And then the third thing is, how do I grow my audience? I got to sit with so I'm writing for Podcast Magazine, which has been really cool. Next month, our issue is going to have, or my section is going to feature Rob Kirkpatrick from Focus on the Family. He's the executive director of their audio content, which I thought was pretty amazing to just speak with him. And he said, one of our biggest challenges is finding new people, is getting our podcast in front of new audience, and that's really the biggest and hardest part. How do you whether it's social media or just getting people to find your show? How do you do it?
Well, how we've done it, and I'm not saying we do it right or do it the best, but because I don't know. I mean, we're only a year in. I know. What are you? You're on year what now? 4, 5?
Yeah, it's 3.5 years. So in June it'll be 4 years.
Yeah, so that's pretty impressive. And you have how many episodes out? If we're saying like the first March 12th area, where were you at?
Yeah, we just published. Like just now, we published episode 177. So if you give it another 6 weeks or so, it'll be 184.
Yeah,
so.
That's pretty impressive. I heard, and I can't remember.
Thanks.
Yeah, seriously, like applause. I can't remember who said this, but somebody said the average podcaster lasts 8 episodes. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I've heard that. So I've heard anywhere from 7 to 11 episodes, just depending on how good you are. So when I started,
and what year was that? Help me out. What year was that?
In 2016, okay. Right when my show launched, June 6th, 2016. And I had 13 episodes in the can. I had them all scheduled out because I just wanted to get past that. I was like, I gotta keep going.
We launched with 6. Yeah,
that works. Whatever works for you. I think so. It all depends. Different people have different philosophies about what you should do. So you can, if you want to start a podcast, just sit down and start, and then do 1 episode at a time. For me, I had to do more than that because I thought I just need to, like, if I don't get past that hump, then I probably won't make it over, and I'll give up, and I'll be discouraged. I could tell just even in my 13 episodes that I had that I got better at asking questions. I got more curious. I got better at some of my audio quality, although all 13 of those had problems in some way or another. But it got better as we went, and then I developed more and more, skills. So I was glad to kind of get over that initial hump right away.
So has podcasting, how has that affected your identity at all?
Oh man, podcasting has completely changed me in some really key ways. I was reflecting on this actually recently. So I mentioned Podcast Magazine. The inaugural issue just launched today, so there's probably 2 issues by the time our friends are hearing this. And I'm having the chance to go out and make some asks of people. So like I just heard back from somebody who I used to listen to on podcasts, and I'd be so excited to hear them. And they said, yeah, they want to sit down with me for an interview to talk about, their podcast and what they do. I never would have done that before. In college, I was a kid. I remember times needing to talk to a professor and standing in the hallway for a embarrassingly long period of time, not wanting to go in and talk to the professor, even though I needed help, and they were there to help me, right? I just didn't want attention. And now, I guess maybe I don't know if I'm seeking attention, but I'm at least okay, and I'm comfortable making an ask. And that has completely, changed my world. It's one of the big lessons I've learned.
Yeah, I think for me, I was never afraid to be in front of someone, and I've been in sales like most of my adult life. So the idea of asking the right question, asking for the sale, asking for the guest, that to me has all come very natural in a lot of respects. And so I've had people reach out to us and be like, "Hey, how do you do what you do?" And I'm like, I don't know. We just do it. The biggest challenge I came into is show notes. So I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, but show notes.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not a writer. Like, the thought of writing a book to me sounds daunting, sounds like awful, sounds like no way. Because, being a kid that grew up with dyslexia, learning disabilities, spelling and written stuff is not easy for me. And so I've God provided this guy, Garrett, who I love so much, who's our executive producer. He has a cool title. We had to give him one because he was doing so much cool stuff. But he's doing all the show notes and doing all the behind the scenes stuff. And to me, that's where it's at. So maybe finding somebody that is going to kind of compliment you that isn't maybe good at asking questions that maybe you are, or vice versa. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That is always an option. I didn't have anybody this was kind of my own little dream. I think to this day my wife doesn't even quite get it. She's like, "Why do you want to talk to?" I actually enjoy hearing the stories that I get to hear, but I think she just wouldn't put herself out there like that. And so I don't know. I was kind of just out there on my own, and so I had to learn some things.
Yeah, we can absolutely.
Like
it wasn't in my notes, but it kind of just came up as we were talking. So yeah, show notes. What do you got on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, so here's my thing with show notes. Show notes, they're good for your search engine optimization, of course, but also I do it really simply. I don't know if you had a chance to look at mine, but basically I do a couple of things. I always do a custom picture where I try to pull some image from from a story that they told. So like I know you had Marcus Watson on. So part of his story was his laptop got confiscated because of this whole thing he was going through. So I did a picture of a laptop, right, with kind of a foggy picture on it. I thought that really embodied the story. And then I actually take notes during the interview. So if I were you right now, I would be writing down the stories that we're talking about and just making note of them. So then that becomes part of the show notes. I write a paragraph. I grab quotes because those become tweetable, and I can throw them on a meme, and then I put in links to other episodes and all the resources, right? So all the things, including books, although I don't say it enough, but my book links are things, they're linked to Amazon, so via the affiliate relationship that you can have with them. So I don't always mention that. I probably should, because maybe more people would go and buy books.
Yeah, we got Garrett. I don't know what Garrett does. I just let him do his thing. So, but he's gonna note this. Cool. So hopefully he'll hear some of the things you're saying and maybe incorporate. We'll borrow some of what you're doing. But one thing we also did, and I don't know if you're doing this, but I heard this on someone else's show. I think it was the Heretic Hour. Have you listened to that one at all? Giving them a little plug, perhaps. but Meg was on that, and so that's why I was listening to it. So, but they have good stuff. But they were talking about this 800, or they had a call-in line, and I thought we need to do that. So I went out and we got a Google Voice number, and so we do have a call-in line. So as of yet, no one has used it,
Very cool.
but maybe after this, people will begin to use it. But it's fun.
That's a good idea. You're inspiring me here because so my show is all about stories, right? People sharing their story of their spiritual journey, and it would be interesting and fun to feature some of my guests or some of my listeners as guests on the show, not just like for the whole hour, but maybe just get them to share a story and run that as well.
Well, you can take the audio file from Google Voice because it not only does it transcribe it, but it also gives you the audio copy, so the MP3 essentially, and you can throw that in to whatever you're editing with, I'm sure. Yeah, so.
Interesting. I may try that.
There you go.
Try that later this year.
Okay, so we talked about identity a little bit. So it's obviously changed you because now you're not afraid to talk to anybody, going back to that professor story, right?
That's pretty true. Yeah. I will talk to everybody. In fact, I got to go to Podcast Movement last year, and I remember, there were a lot of people I just wanted to see. So I got to talk to some of what I would call, the A-listers, podcasters like John Lee Dumas and Pat Flynn, and others. I got to talk to Eric Fisher. I don't know if you know him. He's out there, does a productivity podcast. Used to listen to him in my cube, so it'd be kind of cool. He's actually, I've told him all about my show, and he goes, "I'd be on that." So I've got him
That's
coming
awesome.
up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we and maybe you can speak to this too if you want. We're still struggling with asking to be on someone's show. You talk about the professor in the room, like you're afraid to go talk to him. He's there to help you. As a host, I am so not skeptical. That's not the right word. I'm so afraid to go to another host and be like, "Hey, could we maybe come on your show? Is that do you want to have it? I mean, could we, it's so embarrassing to ask that. How do you get over that?"
That's a good question. So a couple things. Number one, what works really great for me is going into places like the Christian Podcasters Association, which is a Facebook group that I started for Christian podcasters. And I'll just say, "Hey, I'm looking to be on some shows," and usually I'll get 7 or 8 bookings right there. So that's pretty helpful and not very personal. But if there was a show that I really wanted to be on, because you probably get this too, people get pitches all the time, right? And so you really have to be clear about the value that you're going to bring to the audience, because podcasters are very sensitive about what they offer to their audience. Typically, they want to be sure that the content is going to be good. They're not going to be boring. I've been burned a few times where I interviewed people for other relational reasons, and then found out like this person refuses to talk about themselves or to tell me their story about God. That's not good, because that's not what we do. Sometimes I'll run them anyway, but it's just you. So I understand the hesitancy, but I think if you just ask, or the other thing is, this is the second thing. It's always okay to be reciprocal, right? So say, "Hey, I'd love to have you on our show, and would you be interested in having us on yours?" And then at least you're offering something as well. So you're clear about what you bring to their audience, but then also you're giving them even more value by bringing them onto your show. And that's the beautiful thing about podcasting is actually the community. There's only 860,000 podcasts or so. The community is still pretty small, and if you've gone through the work to create a podcast, there aren't that many people who have done it like you. So we are all very still pretty cordial and brotherly in the community.
I've only been on one show so far, and that was the Square One show, and they're amazing. We love them. Dave and Jessica host that. Dave and Jessica Lewis. Jessica actually does voicing of commercials, and she voiced one of ours, and
cool,
did fantastic. So how does one get over not being good enough? Because inevitably, or it's going to happen, right? You always feel like you're not good enough. You listen to someone else's show and you're like, "Man, they're doing it so much better than I am, and I'm just terrible."
Yeah, I have one word. So I learned this from my coach. So one of the best things I ever did, I had well, I don't even remember what year this was. It must have been 2015. I had a sabbatical from my work. I used to work at this company who I'm not going to name, um, and they would give us a 4-week sabbatical after every 5 years. And so I was on sabbatical. I was in the coffee shop, and my friend came up and said to me, we got in the seminary together. I said, hey, we kind of caught up. We hadn't seen each other for a while. He told me he was doing coaching. I told him what I was working on in my podcast. And we ended up developing this coaching relationship. And he helped me figure out that it doesn't have to be perfect the first time, right? I think that's what I was afraid of anyway. I think that's what we're afraid of, being perceived by our first efforts instead of what we're going to become. Like if you would have told me 4 years ago that I would go on a podcast and somebody would say I'm one of the Godfathers of podcasting, I've been like, you're crazy, right? Like I'm still thinking it's a little crazy, but I would have been really, really ashamed of that. And now I go, well, yeah, I like to help people. That's what we do. Podcasting helped me learn that I needed to iterate and just start and just be bad at it for a while. And then you'll get better.
I think we all want, because we see the celebrity name, whoever it may be, the Joe Rogans of the world. I mean, it seems like every celebrity now, oh, so-and-so has a podcast. Oh, so-and-so. And they immediately get, the 10,000, downloads per episode because of their name, because they already have an established brand,
I bet Joe Rogan gets millions of downloads per episode. Here's the deal. Joe Rogan did his time, right? He's a comedian. Do you know what that's like? Like comedians travel the country or they do comedy and they get up and they bomb. Every comedian will tell you that bombing is part of being a comedian. So they'll try new jokes, they'll try things, they'll get laughed off stage or whatever, not in a good way. And that's just part of practicing. So he's comfortable. He also made Fear Factor, right? So he's comfortable in front of a camera, in front of a microphone, because he's done it for thousands and thousands of hours. So you can't. So John Acuff says this, right? Don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle. So powerful and important. Just allow yourself to be not good at it for a little while. Iterate. So I tell this with podcasters all the time about technology. Also, if I started with a Shure SM57 microphone, I think, that I just had around from when I was into music. And that worked for me. And then later I was able to upgrade to a Heil PR40, which is a really nice mic, and got a mixer and some other things. But that just took time, right? It just, once I knew that the show was something I was going to invest in, then I could invest in better equipment. But the important part was starting and then allowing myself to iterate.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you got to start somewhere. And I think, again, there's so many people that think, well, why do I only have like 10 listeners? Well, why, I only have 20 people listening. I only have this. It's like, when
Right.
did you start? Well, I started a month ago. Well, I expect
Right.
10,000 people to listen. Well, first off, do you know 10,000 people? Let's start there.
Right.
Second,
Yeah.
have you told all of your friends and family, hey, by the way, I'm doing a podcast? Like, my family is probably sick of it. My wife is so
Right.
amazing and gracious, and my friends are as well. But undoubtedly, when I'm talking to friends, I'm like, hey, guess who we have coming up? Hey, did you know we got this guy? Or hey, this gal's coming up. Hey, did you know that we got a New York Times bestseller? Did you, and they're like, we got it. You have a podcast. I meet people at work and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? What are you listening to? And they're like, music. I'm like, do you do podcasts? Do you listen to them? And they're like, let me guess, you have one. I'm like, I do actually. It's called Other People's Shoes. It's pretty good. People like it. Subscribe if you want.
Right.
But that's how you grow the audience, right? It's organically. It's
Yep.
not this like magic pill that you can take. It's like weight loss. You're not going to just be skinny overnight, as far as I know.
Right. And you have, well, I would take that, but you have to show up, and that's another one of the things. So iteration is one, but you can't iterate if you don't keep showing up, right? So you need to keep doing it. One of the most important decisions I made in podcasting, I remember, so when I got to the end of those 13 episodes, they were coming to an end. So I did release 3, and then I had 10 weeks of just episodes publishing without me having to do anything. And I got to about, week 8, and I started thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to follow this up? Because I had recorded those shows probably a year before I actually launched them and released them. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I had to make a choice to actually stop being afraid of asking people to be on the show and just reach out to people online. And so there was a guy named Richard Jacobson who has a really interesting story, but also he had written a book called Unchurching, which is a whole nother area. I found it very fascinating. But I reached out to him. Like, I saw him, he posted that he was excited he just published his book, and I said, hey, I'd love to hear your story. Would you come on my podcast? And he agreed. I was like, oh, great. So that's when I first had this idea that, oh yeah, if I just keep going. But then I would sometimes have gaps, and so I'd have 4 episodes, and then I didn't know what was going to happen, and I had to decide, even if I don't have a guest, I'm going to make something. So even if that meant on a Sunday night, I publish on Monday morning. If on a Sunday night I am down in the basement till 11 o'clock or midnight trying to work on something to publish the next day, I was going to do it no matter what. I was going to make sure there was content on Monday, and that single decision is probably one of the most important ones, right after deciding I was going to be okay with not being good enough right away.
I love that. I love all of that because I had the same mindset. We just celebrated our year at the end of January, and I made a commitment to myself every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And because we release every Wednesday, and man, there have been like 11 p.m., 11:45, right before it hits midnight, getting that uploaded. And the other thing that I went through too, and maybe you could speak to this, maybe you don't want to, plug them per se, but I went through 3 different hosting companies.
Wow.
I started with Lipson, and nothing against them. They're great. Their analytics are wonderful. Everybody loves them, and they are great. They were too expensive for me. And I'm going to just tell them that. So if they're listening, Dave Jackson, hear me. You're too expensive for a starting podcaster. I'm poor. Like, I run my show. We run our show off $40.
Yeah.
$40. That's it. That's all it takes. And the reason why it's so high is because I finance the Roadcaster. So let's not talk about Dave Ramsey right now, but let's talk about hosting still, right? Because that's not good to finance things. But if you know you're going to do it, and it was an investment, I mean, it's a $600 investment to say, I believe in myself and I believe in the show, and the show believes in me, right? So anyway, that's why it's $40. So anyway, but I went from Lipson to Buzzsprout, love Buzzsprout, still love them. And then now we're at Simplecast. And the only reason why I left Buzzsprout is I didn't really love their stats. Their customer service was amazing. Their website was amazing. Everything about it was amazing, but their stats were what was lacking. So I don't know if you want to share your host or maybe share your host story, but there we are.
Yeah. You know what? So this is another thing, we'll talk about iterating that I actually need to iterate pretty soon. So one of the things, because I was just terrified of the technology, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I found a thing called Rainmaker Platform, which was put out by Copy Blogger and Brian Clark, if you know who they are, one of the early content marketing guys, and who I really respect. I love his strategy. I like everything that they do. And so they have this platform, which is basically a WordPress overlay. So if people don't know what that is, look it up. But it just is a WordPress website that you can use, but they built into it everything you could possibly need. So if you want to do a membership site, you can do that. If you want to do email marketing, you can do that. If you want to sell products, you can do that. And if you want a podcast, you can do that, and you can actually upload it right to your website. Now, normally I would not recommend that at all, but this was built for that. So that's how it's okay. But so I actually host it right there. And man, I wish I had an affiliate link for that right now, but just in case anybody wants to get it. But so it's really good. But I would probably like to go to something with more robust stats, because that's the one thing that is missing at present.
Yeah. When we switched, and I don't know, I don't know anything about that because math is not my thing. Talking to people and selling products, that's where it's at for me. But our stats almost tripled when we went from
Wow.
Buzzsprout to Simplecast. I don't know why. I don't know why. So I'm gonna just let that sit on the table and people can discern that however they desire.
You're going with it. You know what? So I think it's really, stats are really good and they're very important. But your number of downloads really is not the way to judge your podcast. I don't think it helps, and it's kind of nice. Like it's great. You know, I often tell people. I don't know. I won't say. I often say the number that I've hit, and I'm proud of that. But what I'm more excited about is when somebody reaches out to me and says, "Hey, you know, that episode changed the way that I see God, right? Or that changed the way that I am interacting with God in my life because I heard this person go through the same thing that I'm going through." Like that's the kind of engagement that I'd much rather see.
I'm gonna say this right now on the record. I could care less about how many downloads I have. Could care 100% less. That is the number one question everyone asks me when I see them at church or I see them at work or I see them, you know, we're trying to engage in companies to partner with us. That's the number one question I get. How many downloads do you get? And my answer is always, does it really matter?
Right.
And their response is usually like, well, I don't know, does it? And I say, well, here's what should matter to you. Who's going to hear your message? And is it going to change their life? And they're like, okay, that's all that should matter, right? And I'm like, 100%. We've had an episode came out recently for us, if I can brag on our show a little bit. It is my show. I can brag about my own show, right? I don't know. Is that bad? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had one come out called we're in a series that you're now a part of too. This identity, this vision, this cost series that we've been in that will wrap up at the end of April. But in that, we had an episode called Mother. And we sat with a mom who lost her daughter at 15 years old. The daughter took her life. And I had so many people come up to me after that episode and was like, most powerful thing you've ever done. That was amazing. I can't believe you made her cry. That was amazing. Wow. How did you ask her that? Wow. Her family even said, some of the questions you've asked her, we've wanted to ask her for the last 5 years and we've not been able to. How did you ask her that? I'm like,
wow.
I don't know. I don't know. So it's things like that. When I hear things like that, I'm like, I could care less about how many people downloaded that. It's that right there in that moment that I'm like, we made a difference, you know?
Right. Yeah, which is what it's about, really. You know, you have a mission and you have a message that you want to get out, and that is, you know, really what you need to care about. So especially getting engagement and finding out from people that, hey, you know, this is powerful. I mean, so like I said on my show, we have people tell us their stories of relationships with God, and it's just so powerful. Like, and I know that even, you know, that people hear it and they can either relate to where this person is. So that's one reason I started my show, right? Because in my tradition, I don't know what yours is, but my tradition, we never talked about how the dark night of the soul or the spiritual desert was a normal part of the journey. So I wanted to kind of normalize some of that and talk about it. So now I've got 175 plus examples of people talking about when God felt far away. And so, yeah, it's actually normal. And so my hope is that people can hear it and actually relate to it if they're in that season. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Speaking of your show, what is the vision for your show going forward?
Going forward from here?
Yeah, just from here, or where do you see it going?
Yeah. You know, this year, one thing I've done is I've decided to be a little bit more selective. So our tagline is honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. So we're talking about people's experiences with God. Sometimes we're trying to go beyond what was traditionally called a testimony. My life was terrible. I met Jesus. Now my life is great. We're talking about all the other stuff that happens on the spiritual journey, how you learned, how you found yourself in Christ, and then how, you know, how that works itself out. So I'm going to be a little more selective. I'm trying to curate something and find new kinds of conversations and new kinds of experiences. I'm totally okay with hearing stories. Everybody has a story, and um, they're bound to be similar. But I'm looking for other people groups that I haven't had a chance to hear from again or before, because there are they tend to have different experiences. So I the way that works out now is I've had people from all different regions of the United States. I've had people from different places in the world. I interviewed last year a woman from England. I interviewed a guy who's a missionary in South America but he's originally from Canada. I interviewed a guy who is from New Zealand, but works in Cambodia, things like that. And people who've ministered in South Africa and are from there. So that's I really want to kind of curate that experience a little bit more, even denominationally, racially, stream wise. So what I mean by that is Richard Foster wrote a book called Streams of Living Water that talks about the different streams of Christianity that people have, and so trying to find people in different streams there as well. Just find different kinds of experiences. Does that make sense?
No, I think it does. You really want to get a more wide perspective on Christianity, I would think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
On the kinds of experiences that people are having. So that's the goal.
So we'll change gears a little bit. Cardinals fan, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're in Missouri, right?
Well, actually, I'm in Colorado.
Oh, well, okay.
But that's okay. I wasn't going to tell you that.
Well, I'm one day going to get a map in the studio, and we're going to have a pinprick for every place we've been. So I dream of that. But those maps are like $70. They're
expensive.
They're expensive.
But I'm a Cardinals fan because I grew up in Iowa, and Iowa has a lot of Cardinals fans, because I think you can hear KMOX from Des Moines, where I'm at, which is where the radio station the Cardinals are on. But there's a lot of Cardinals fans there.
Okay, so being a Cardinals fan, I'm a Giants fan. We're just gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay.
All right, I'm gonna share a picture with you on Facebook.
Okay.
I have a friend who's from San Francisco. He's a Giants fan, and I made the unfortunate mistake of betting him a couple of years about hey, whoever wins when the Cardinals and Giants were in the National League Championship Series.
I remember that. We went on to the World Series. I just want to put that out there.
We don't have to talk about that. The loser would have to wear
and won it, by the way, and won it.
Yeah, I know. And I bet that 2 years that we lost, I bet on my cards, and we lost. And he's got pictures of me wearing Giants jerseys, and he just shared it again recently. I was like, dude, that's not cool, man. I gotta do that. But I love
awesome.
baseball. Baseball is such a beautiful sport. It's my favorite.
It's kind of tainted right now, but that's not my question.
Well, okay, look.
Do you want to talk about the Astros for a minute?
The Astros they were just kind of jerks. I mean, unfortunately, I feel bad about this because for lots of reasons, but Carlos Beltran was part of that team, right? Like he was, when he came to the Cardinals after Albert Pujols left. When he came to the Cardinals after Albert Pujols left, he was like a hero, right? Because we had this. He was kind of our guy in the middle of the order, and I was disappointed. So I don't know what to say about it. I think people get over it, but we'll see.
We got other things to worry about, all kinds of stuff. So back to this. Being a Cardinals fan, right? I know you're a diehard Cardinals fan. So you get an opportunity to sit with Ozzie Smith. Speaking of Albert Pujols, you get to sit with him, or you get to sit with Jesus. All three of them, maybe, or one of them. Which one do you sit with, and what do you ask them?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, so assuming, I get to sit with Jesus all the time, so we'll so that's fine. But if I could ask Ozzie Smith and Albert Pujols anything, I guess I would ask them about what makes them great. Like, what do they think it takes to be a really great, not just athlete, but great at a certain skill? And that would be interesting to hear their perspectives. because I think it's a combination. My suspicion would be it's a combination of innate talent, but also hard work and showing up to do the work. But I'd be curious to hear what they had to say about that.
Yeah, my grandmother was a Cardinals fan, so there you go.
That's a good lady, no doubt. At one time when I was a little kid, got to go to St. Louis and got to go out. We toured Busch Stadium, and we got to go out onto the field even. And I went out. The place I went was shortstop. I went out to go stand where Ozzie Smith stands. And that was pretty cool. And I think that night or maybe the next night we got to go see a baseball game and see him.
So, being a Giants fan, my favorite player is Will Clark, and they're going to retire his number this summer. And
nice.
And I'm trying to figure out how I can get there to San Francisco to see it, because I would love to sit with that guy. Like, if you could say, hey, Neil, you can have any guest you want. It's a short list, but he's definitely on that list. So, and he was also a Cardinal, so you got to like him a little bit, right?
Right. I was wondering about that. But yeah, he's
yeah. So going back into podcasting, why do you think people fail? I know we kind of talked about some challenges that people have, and maybe that's kind of very similar, but people are failing also. Why do you think that is?
Well, it depends on what your definition of success is, right? So you can only fail if you quit. So, the other thing that can happen is if you don't know who you're trying to talk to, and if you don't know that or what you're trying to accomplish, I think you can fail. So you have a pretty good brand, right? You've thought about, okay, what am I gonna do? And you've got some questions that you ask everybody. I think that's a really good way to go, and you've got kind of this idea of we're trying to convey a certain thing, even though each episode is going to have a different flavor to it based on the guest. I think there's some people, I've seen some people, they do things like, oh, I just want to, have witty banter, right? Like, because that sounds really easy, but it's actually not. It's really hard. And so if you're not focused enough and you're not committed enough to like a certain mission, you're never going to keep with it. You're going to just stop after that 7 or 11 episodes that people say.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think so many people, again, are trying to duplicate what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's true.
I think at one point you put on Facebook or social somewhere that, did you go out and listen to other episodes or other shows before you started? Somebody put that out there, maybe in the group.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't. And maybe that's bad, but I didn't, because part of the reason why I didn't is I didn't really want to hear someone else and use their style. I wanted to find my own way, which is kind of me and my personality anyway. Like, I want to stand away from the crowd. I don't want to be in the crowd. So.
Right. I actually found podcasting. So I had listened to podcasts before. I remember as early as 2010 listening to podcasts, but it wasn't until I changed jobs at my work where I went from waiting for a phone call. Basically, I was working at a call center, so I could read blogs in between, phone calls, to a job where I actually had to work for a living. So I was, clicking and doing things. I had to change. I can't entertain myself by reading, so I need to do something else. So I switched to audio and podcasting, and I fell in love with this medium. I listened to people like I said, John Lee Dumas and Cliff Ravenscraft and Michael Hyatt and Pat Flynn, all those guys. I would consider those guys way up there, top notch. And then, but a whole bunch of other people. But what happened is I was listening to John Lee Dumas one day on Entrepreneurs on Fire, and he had this guy named Michael O'Neill on his show. They're friends. And Michael O'Neill has a show called Solopreneur Hour. I don't know if you've heard of that, but I fell in love
I haven't.
with it. So they had two very different styles. I think today John Lee Dumas does a little differently, but back then he was doing his thing where he had the set questions and he would just ask, the same questions every episode. And I found, that was kind of like a lot of people tried to do that, like you were saying. Imitation is the highest form of flattery. But when I found Michael O'Neill in Solopreneur Hour, he had a very different approach, and I didn't ever try to copy him, but it gave me permission to go, okay, I can have a more free flowing conversation. I can, try to dig into people's past and their life in a way that is very informal and fun and interesting to me. And that just gave me the opportunity to go, yeah, I actually can do that. It kind of gave me the confidence to say I can podcast. I was having all kinds of great conversations with people at the coffee shop down the street. I just wasn't recording any of them. And so it's kind of a switch to go, oh, yeah, I'm actually going to just record these conversations now.
Yeah. And again, I think everyone's got to find their own way and find their own, what works for them. What works for you may not work for us and may not work for someone else. So for sure. What's the difference between podcasting as a hobby and podcasting as a job, do you think?
Oh, man. Well, money, basically. I mean, if you want to podcast as a job, you need to be able to make money in some way. And people ask me that a lot. Well, how do you make money podcasting? And there's a lot of ways, I guess. I'm finding right now there's a lot of money around podcasting. Your actual podcast may not bring you more than publicity or the ability to get in front of people and say, hey, there's this thing I'm doing. But there is money around podcasting. For instance, there's a company that's paying me to get one of their authors onto the shows, right? So I'm working on pitching her work, her presence on other people's podcasts right now. That's one way. People do editing. It just depends on what kind of skills you have and what you can do.
My wife always calls it a hobby. I'm like, we are a legit nonprofit business. Hello.
Nice.
We are actually a legit nonprofit business. So
that's awesome.
Other people's shoes you can give to it, of course. Click on our PayPal account now in our show notes. So please be aware of that.
There you go. I have Patreon too, so if people want to do that. That's one thing I finally had to give into.
We didn't do Patreon, and maybe we still will, but I'm still on the fence with that. Somebody needs to get me off the fence, I guess. But anyway. So, Eric, as we start to wrap up, I'm just curious, why do you feel so called to help people? I know it's probably maybe just, you're just a really nice guy, I mean, your only downfall is the Cardinals, but I mean, you really are a nice guy. I mean, every time I see you on social, you're always helping somebody, you're clarifying something, you started the group. I mean, why do you feel so called to help?
Yeah, well, for starters, the St. Louis Cardinals have more championships than any team besides the Yankees. I just thought I'd point that out. But secondly, I'd like to help people. I've always wanted to help people, and for a long time I thought that would be as a pastor. Turns out that's not true. Sometime in 2002, I wrote in my journal that I thought God maybe had a non-conventional ministry for me. Fast forward 15 or 17 years, and here we are doing it. Doing something quite different. Here's the thing. I believe, I like to say that I'm a human activist, which rubs some people a little bit the wrong way, but I also think God is a human activist. He obviously is going to accomplish his purposes for history, but I also think, Jesus has proved that he cares about people, right? And that he wants to have us in his relationship with him. And so with that, if that's a true thing, how can I not help other people become who it is that God has made them to be? That's a big part of my story. I struggled. I told you I worked at a bank after seminary for 8 or 9 years, and it was just genuinely terrible at times. But because I've been through that, it makes me really passionate about helping other people figure out their message, their voice. We can do the technology, that's the easy part, and then help them grow their show. It matters to me that people find out who they are and pursue it, because that's what we're here for, right?
Couldn't agree more. I just was curious the thought process behind it, because so far, I mean, I haven't met too many podcasters, and I wasn't at the Spark conference that happened in Houston, so I don't want to talk about that. Maybe next year. But I'm excited because every time I've ever talked to someone that has a show or is, maybe in the process of, it just seems this amazing ability that people are like, how can I help? What do you need? It's just this, I've never had anyone say, no, figure that out on your own. I mean, I've read a couple comments like that, but I'm like, okay, throw that away. But it just seems like everyone wants to help, genuinely wants to help, and wants them to succeed. Have you found that to be the experience too?
Absolutely. It's a small community. It really is. So the funny thing is the Christian category is the biggest category in iTunes or Apple Podcasts. I think that's because of sermons. A lot of pastors podcast their sermons. But it's also because we've got a message. And I am not going to state the message in the same way that you're going to state it, right? I've got a background in spiritual formation, and so I approach my show in a very deliberate way to help that come out and to help other people, hear it and be shaped themselves. But that's great, right? It's that. So here's the theological point is really the body of Christ, right? This is what it is. Paul has that whole thing about, not everybody's an arm, right? Not everybody's a foot. Not everybody's an eye. We all have our part to play, and it matters.
So I've shared this a number of times on our show, but I'm hoping somebody just like makes a plaque out of it. So any crafty people out there on Etsy or something like that want to help me out, we'll hang it in the studio and give you credit, of course. These are the 8 steps that I think people need to be successful, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. First off, step number 1, humility. Before you can do anything, you got to be humble, right? Second step, there's got to be training involved, right? Because you don't just wake up and like, oh, I'm gonna figure that out. Adaptability, obviously being able to adapt and mold and make and figure stuff out. Trial and error, self-explanatory. Hunger, nobody's gonna make you, get up in the morning and prepare for a show or post something or get something. You gotta have that hunger on your own. Faithfulness, you could almost interchange that with consistency.
Yep. Next
one, perseverance. And then last, of course, not least, cost. So speak to those maybe 8 points if you want, and just see what you think on that as you digest that.
Oh, man. Well, I think those are all right. The one that stands out to me is hunger, and that's kind of what we talked about earlier with the decision. It's also consistency, I guess, the decision to, show up every week, right? But the reason I did that was because I was hungry. I needed to find something that actually was successful that I tried, and so, but that, the hunger just really will drive you forward. It can break some people too. That's the really hard part. Is sometimes people who are hungry, they do some bad things in order to try to get what they want. But for the most part, if you let it drive you to just keep going, and this is one of my personality type things that I just don't really, it's just hard for me to keep going with things. But I've kind of had to learn that. Did you ever read the book The Dip by Seth Godin?
Is there an audiobook for that?
Probably. I believe there is. I think that's how I listen to it.
I'm a big audiobook guy, which is terrible because we have authors come on and they're like, we'll send you the book. I'm like, is there an audio version? You can send the paperback version to Garrett. He'll read that.
Yeah, sometimes I'll do that. But he talks about in The Dip the idea of quitting the right things. But then he also talks about, kind of getting past the dip. So even right now, I'm in the process of setting up a membership site for Christian podcasters, and it's a thing that I know that probably once we launch it, we're hoping to launch it on April 1st. Once we launch it, let's say in the second month, I may be discouraged, right? It may not be getting the kind of traction that I wish it was getting. But if you stick with it, stay hungry, right? Then I know that it'll be successful. So I've actually, you talk about promises to ourselves. I've given myself a 2-year promise on that. I'm going to work at it 2 years, do the work every month, because I think ultimately it'll pay off.
Those 8 steps are courtesy of Louis Giglio of Passion City Church. So we'll give credit to Louis again on that. So
there you go.
I heard that he gave a message on that. I was probably mid-season 1, and I was really getting discouraged. And then I heard these 8 steps, and they changed my life forever. And now they're everywhere. They find their way into most shows. They do. They just find their way into shows. So Eric, let's talk about your show. Favorite guest, favorite episode, and if so, why and which one should we go listen to first, and then talk about your show, of course.
Okay. Well, all right. So it's like asking me to choose my favorite child. So that's tough. But there are a few that I really, really love. I'll just give you the most recent. So I had a chance last year to interview Oz Guinness. So Oz Guinness is he is of the Guinness family that you're familiar with, of beer fame. And he just told me some amazing stories. But the reason that was really special for me was because his book, A Free People's Suicides, is the one that set me in the path to go towards podcasting. He didn't have any idea, of course. I told him and sort of fanboyed out a little bit, but because it was just so powerful. He said in that book, he talked about how important character is, and I at the time had been struggling to write a political blog about Christians and politics, which I quickly found out nobody actually cares what I think about that topic. But and also I had trained in seminary as a pastor, right? So I was learning how to preach, and I just found I was not very good at telling people what to think or what to do. It just didn't sit well with me. But when I heard him talk about character, I realized that character isn't changed by telling people what they should do. Character is changed by telling them a story. And so that actually sent me on a different trajectory that ultimately ended up in podcasting, in a story podcast, not a podcast about, hey, here's the 3 actionable points for your spiritual life or whatever. So it was a very intentional decision. So when I got to talk to Oz Guinness, I was just astounded. This man, he actually, besides just being in the Guinness family, right, he studied with Francis Schaeffer, which was one of my sort of spiritual heroes of the 20th century. So anyway, there's that. But my show is really, like I said, we're going on the spiritual journey. I want to hear how people came to Christ. I want to hear how they were discipled and felt, how they learned about the Bible and theology, and maybe their mentors I'll ask about. And then also we talk about the dark night of the soul. We talk about the spiritual desert and how that's a normal part of the journey, what they learned through that, which is always a very interesting conversation, and then kind of maybe where they're going now. So it just depends on. I've had people at all of those stages. I just last year I interviewed a woman who I used to work with named Kelly Albright, who recently just came to Christ. And so I say she's in that very early stages of her journey, and yet it was worth hearing because God answered some prayers of mine to bring her to Christ. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know you had Marcus on, and we've had Marcus on, and that's an episode that I really liked to go back and listen to.
He was great. There's so many. I got to talk to this is so good. I got to talk to John Schlitt. Do you remember Petra?
Of course, yeah. Who doesn't remember Petra? Hello.
Right? Okay, I was a real Christian music nerd. I loved Petra, and his story is just astounding. I mean, he gets thrown out of a secular rock band in the middle of the 80s, like 1980 maybe, in the Midwest for doing too much cocaine. Like, how much cocaine do you have to do to get thrown out of a secular rock band in 1980? That's a lot of cocaine, man.
That's awesome. What episode number is that? I haven't checked that one out yet. What was that?
In the 50s. I'll find it for you.
All right. Yeah, because if you can, send it to me, and we'll link that one for sure, because I know some Petra fans and past guests that are diehard Petra fans that would probably love to hear that.
Yeah. I just told it. It's episode 94. So, but so fun. I just absolutely loved it. I'm working, if anybody knows him, I'm working on Jamie Rowe, who is the lead singer for Guardian, who I also really loved a lot. A little harder edge to them, but love that guy. So he's kind of cool. But anyway, so there's a lot. I also had similarly around that same time I talked to a guy named John Swanger, who came to Christ doing an 8 ball of cocaine and reading the New Testament all night. So if you think God can't do anything, I would say you're wrong. God, this guy went to jail. He did jail time for bank robbery. He was working as a bouncer at a strip mall with strip clubs, and a Bible student gave him a Bible and said, "Hey, I think you should read this," and he did. And God like totally changed his life, and he ended up helping a bunch of people around Denver, where I am, and then also up in Seattle, a bunch of homeless and outcast people. He ended up being a real blessing to them. So those are some pretty amazing stories, and I just feel privileged to have heard them and had the opportunity to share them.
Okay, my last question, then we're going to play a game. So if you could have anybody, and I mean anybody, doesn't matter, we'll exclude maybe biblical characters because, I mean, that's easy, but anybody in history that outside of a biblical character to sit on your show, who would that be?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a great question. And there's a lot of options, isn't
there? There's practically like a million options.
I know. There's billions probably. I'm trying to think through history, like who would really fascinates me. I'd love to probably have Abraham Lincoln. I think his faith was very understated and yet definitely present. I'd be kind of curious. Although I'm guessing, well, he was supposed to be a good storyteller, so I'm guessing he'd be pretty good. I'm a big fan of like the founding fathers as well. So I'm actually on this sort of pursuit right now to read a biography of every U.S. president. But I used to listen to audiobooks. Speaking of those, but there's no audiobook of any biography about Martin Van Buren. Can you believe that?
That's incredible.
No, nobody wants to hear about it. That's why. But anyway, so I'd probably go with Lincoln.
Yeah, Lincoln. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I made a unicorn list when I started. So I have a list of 10 names, and it kind of fluctuates depending on how I feel about that person at the time. But I have a unicorn list, and so I've been able to cross off 2 people off the unicorn list. So yeah.
Okay. Now, wait. So you're talking, but you said in history. So
yeah, I mean, really anybody. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a historical figure. It could be anybody famous, anybody, whatever.
So if we're talking about history, that I would go with Abraham Lincoln. But if we're talking about people who are still alive that I could actually have on my show, so Oz Guinness was one. He was on that list. Now, I've actually had the privilege of having some of the people on my list. Like I had Cliff Ravenscraft twice last year. I couldn't believe it. That was amazing. But I would probably say the people that I still want to have on there. I want to have Sky Jitani. If you don't know him, he
is on
Who's that? He's on the Holy Post podcast with Phil Vischer. And in fact, Phil Vischer would be a good one too. But Phil Vischer is the guy who started VeggieTales.
Oh, okay.
So most people know him. Sky Jitani just has a really great view. They had this conversation about fundamentalism versus evangelicalism after the Christianity Today article that was calling for Trump to be removed from office came out. It redefined my view of both of those things. They're different movements. He also wrote a book called With that is probably one of the top 5 books that I think all Christians should read, particularly evangelical Christians.
What's the name of it again?
It's called With, WITH.
Okay.
And his message is, hey, God wants to be with us, not to have us, under him or over him or serving him. Like there's a lot of things that we kind of do. He corrects all that. And I think that is really good. So he's on my list. In fact, he's coming out with a book in April. I'm thinking I might be able to get him at that point. Who else? There's a couple others that I would really love to have, but that Sky Jitani is kind of at the top of the list right now.
Okay, so since we're full disclosure, here's my list. You ready? This is embarrassing. I don't know why we're talking about this, but Toby Mac, Love that guy. I want him desperately. So if somebody's hearing this who could get me in touch with him, that would make a little boy's dream come true. I met him once at a pre-concert event and changed my life, signed my shoes. Anyway.
Cool.
Don't wear those shoes now anymore. So they're retired.
Right.
My dad. Is that weird?
No.
But I would really love to finally sit and have a conversation with my dad that I could probably remember forever. My dad's a Marine, and we didn't always see eye to eye growing up, and I don't think he really even understands the whole podcast thing. Like, we've talked about it, and he kind of asks about it from time to time, but I would really love to just sit with my dad, have that moment. My third one, my fourth grade elementary school teacher. She was the first one that really discovered that I had some learning challenges, and because of her discovery, kind of put me on a trajectory to get help to then kind of lead me on to greater things. So that's kind of cool.
Very cool.
I'd say her name, but I don't know. People are weird about that. I'll go 4 because 3 is weird and 4 is better. So my last one would probably be, boy, I would really want like Martin Luther King Jr. I would love to get in his head and his shoes and just everything. Like, how did he think? Like, what was his thought process behind his movements? Because they were methodical and they were planned out. They weren't like, oh, let's just go down here and just do this. I mean, there was some thought process there. So
yeah,
those are my 4.
I think you would find he would be quite different than we imagined. That's my guess.
And I've heard that as well from different people, but I want to see for myself,
Totally. You're right. That would be a great interview. So you've sparked my memory here. There's a couple others. So one, and I need to make this happen. I asked both of my living grandmothers to be on my show at Christmas time, and they were both very embarrassed by that fact. They're like, I don't know what I have to say. But it's not, I'm in my 40s, early 40s. It's not usual for someone my age to have grandparents still living.
Yeah, both mine are gone, so consider that a blessing for sure.
It is pretty cool. My grandfather just died last April, and so it made me realize that it's a pretty good privilege to have living grandparents, and it would be interesting to hear their perspective on their faith as that relates to my own. And then also somebody that I would love to have on the show is Adam Wainwright, star pitcher of the St. Louis Cardinals. He's a believer. He's actually doing right now a Read Through the Bible challenge on Twitter, and so he's a believer. But I would love to get him on and just hear his story.
So I always reach out to people. I send this really like sad email, like, we're not very big. Would you come on our show? And we were able to get, recently we were able to get KJ52 from the Christian rap community. So we're pretty excited about him. He came out in some previous weeks. So if you haven't listened to it, go listen to that one. That's a fun interview as well. All right. So Eric, we'll wrap up the show. Thanks for coming on, man.
It was my pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
How do people listen again? Just throw that all out there again.
Well, yeah. So the best thing to do is if you go in your podcast app and just search for Halfway There. That's the name of the show. People remember it because everybody remembers Living on a Prayer, right? So it's one part hat tip to Bon Jovi. Whoa, whoa, we're halfway there. And then one part, my way of saying, hey, we're on the journey. And that journey never stops, even when we're in eternity. We're only going to be halfway there because it's eternity, right? So just look it up in your favorite podcast app. I'm at ericnevins.com, and I have some free resources if you want those that are available as well. And wrote a little ebook called What to Do When You're Mad at God. It's not very long, but it's about Habakkuk and his approach to handling God in one of those rough seasons.
That's awesome. I love that. And we, of course, will link all that in our show notes. So you get to play our game Senseless, and since you are not here, I will roll on your behalf. So you're going to have to trust my rolling ability and that I'm going to give you the right answer. So you got number 4, which is what is your favorite sound or noise that you love to hear?
Oh, man. All right. Well, I love to hear an electric guitar. So I'm kind of a guitar guy, and I just absolutely love it. So just picked up my kids a few minutes ago, and I was rocking out to a little bit of Guns N' Roses on the way home. So that's what I like.
That's funny. People are like, wait, you're a Christian and you're listening to Guns N' Roses? I don't know about that. Did you just reference Bon Jovi and you're a Christian? I don't know if we can handle that.
It.
I don't know. I don't know. I thought we could only listen to Christian music. Switchfoot, maybe. I mean, that's all we can listen to.
It's my confession. I love a good hair band. It's the best.
My cousin got to meet Bret Michaels a couple of years ago.
Oh, cool.
She shook his hand. I'm like, I hope you watched that like 17 times.
They're going to be here. They're going to be in town, I think. They're like touring. It's like Def Leppard and Poison and
oh my gosh.
a whole bunch of people.
You're front row.
I'm thinking about
You're
going.
Front row with your Zippo. I can just see you now.
Maybe not front row, but you know what? I waited until like 2 days before to get Billy Joel tickets, and I got really good seats. So I may do that this time too.
Billy Joel, Piano Man, Billy Joel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
that
man.
was great.
I don't want to start
that. Was a bucket list.
I don't want to start that fire. But
exactly.
That's a bad pun.
Here's the deal, though. I don't know if you have time for this.
We got time.
So I used to. I never shared this until I went to go see the show. But when I was in middle school, a hard time, right? I used to come home. I was kind of a latchkey kid, I guess, and we were just like steps away. My school was literally attached to my backyard, so I didn't have far to go. I'd come home, nobody else would be home, and I would turn on that album, which is Stormfront, and I would basically sing the thing front to back, right? Like I would just go through that, and that was sort of my emotional release for the day. So he played quite a few songs from that album, including my favorite, which is I Go to Extremes, because I'm an Enneagram 4 and ENFP and the Myers-Briggs. So that's just what I do. I'm like extreme all the time, one way or the other. It doesn't matter. And that I literally almost cried standing right about second base at Coors Field, watching Billy Joel play this song. It just meant so much to me to actually hear it live. It was incredible.
You're an Enneagram 4, is that what you said?
I am, yeah.
I am too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's chaotic though, right?
It's chaotic.
Yeah.
Some days are really awesome. Some days are not.
Exactly.
My wife is a 1 and my daughter is a 8. So there you go.
Gotcha. That's fun. My wife is a 6, which is interesting. So 6s are kind of known for being just seeing the worst case scenario. And so I come up with, hey, I want to do this cool thing. And then she goes, what? There's all these problems with that, right? And so we've taken us, 20 years to kind of figure out how to navigate that in a healthy way.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the Enneagram, and my wife came home one day and she's like, hey, will you take this personality survey? I'm like, sure. Yeah, whatever, I'll take it. She goes, I think you're a 4 though. I'm like, oh, great, because that's my favorite number. So I'm sure I'm a 4. And sure enough, I'm a 4.
Nice. That's why I go to extremes.
Yeah, I know, and I love that. I love that whole CD too. Or back in my day, it was a CD and cassette, I'm sure. But yeah,
it was the first CD I ever bought.
Yeah, and
I identified with that song so much. So yeah, when I heard it, when I heard him play it live, it just
broke you. I'm gonna have to go listen to that. I'm gonna have to go listen to that now. I'm gonna go on a run later today, and I'm gonna throw that on the iPod. So there you go. Eric, thanks so much for coming on. Thank you for your wisdom, your insight, your knowledge, your ability just to articulate and help people. I love that about you. I love your heart. You're the same as you are, not only on the phone, but you're the same as you are on social from the sound of it. So, man, thanks so much for coming on. Hey, guys, go check out what Eric's doing. Halfway there. Good way to remember it. Yours truly is now 40. Gosh, I'm halfway to 80. Can you believe that? Oh. Anyway, go check out my guest, Eric. Great stuff. He's doing some great stuff for podcasters too. So if you're interested in that, he is a great resource. And of course, I'm a great resource as well, but him more so. He's got more experience. But anyways, guys, we want to invite you back next week. Of course, this is Other People's Shoes. And remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. I, of course, am your host, Neil Matthews. We'll see you next week as we try on Other People's Shoes. Thank you so much for joining us on Other People's Shoes. As you know, I'm your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I gotta be honest, I know for some of you, you probably maybe didn't really love today's episode. I don't know. But I want to let you know there's a reason why I had Eric come on. Eric, to me, has been a great mentor in this podcasting process. As I alluded to in the episode, he really is the godfather in my mind of podcasting. So for us, it was a great opportunity to get into the mind of greatness. Now, I know for some of you, you're like, I'm not into podcasting, but maybe you should be. So here's my little PSA on podcasting. Podcasting has really, in all intents and purposes, changed my life forever. I love the fact that I get to come to you each and every week and share my thoughts and put guests in front of you and in front of your ears that I believe could change your life for the better. So it's great to sit with Eric today. By the way, speaking of a guest that could change your life for the better, here's a little sneak preview of next week.
I had been addressing the emotional side. I had been addressing the mental and cognitive side. I had been addressing the physical side. But I had not been addressing the spiritual side. Up to that point, I didn't even recognize there was a spiritual side to depression or anxiety or so many of our medical disorders.
That is right. The doctor is in. So make sure you have your 2 cents worth. Charlie Brown would give to Lucy. Make sure you're here back next week for that. Dr. Michelle is going to be in the house. It's going to be great. Amazing episode. I cannot wait to share that with you. Super excited about that. So, in case you're wondering to how you can hear future episodes, of course, that can be done at opspodcast.com. It's a great place to bookmark for each and every Wednesday. Come back, hear it. They'll be available to you. Not only that current week's episode, but of course, past and present episodes are there as well. If you would like to give to the show in any way, of course, we have linked that in our PayPal account down below. Please feel free to give. We would love for you to partner with us financially. That, of course, can be a tax-deductible donation because we are, in fact, a nonprofit organization. If you have questions, comments, or just want to tell Garrett and I we're doing a great job, that can be done either calling or texting this phone number, 203-548-7463. That's 203-548-7463. It spells shoe, so kind of cute. By the way, if you'd like to follow us, tweet us, or just keep up to our daily comings and goings, that can be done at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the tagline or the name, however you want to say it, domain name. There it is, maybe, as OPS Podcast Show. So pretty easy there. And remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. I just want to say, on behalf of Garrett and myself, thank you so much for joining us each and every week. We, of course, hope you have a great week. And we'll see you right back here on Wednesday as we try on other people's shoes.